Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary, Shirley, and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
Welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast with Lisa Fine and Mary Shirley. I'm Mary Shirley, and my podcast wife is Lisa Fine. Today is another Soliloquy episode. The last time I recorded one of these, I was home in New Zealand during the pandemic. This time I'm home in Boston, still during the pandemic. I'm going to do a rants and raves episode. I think it's important to have balance in life. We cannot just be overly optimistic and unrealistic all the time. So it helps to have a little bit of the good and a little bit of the bad. And this idea is inspired by one of our sister podcasts on the Compliance Podcast Network that Tom Fox hosts, where the Everything Compliance gentlemen share shout outs and disappointments. So I'm going to do the same today, some topical things with compliance bends and how I've been thinking on them. And I encourage you, if you've got a bee in your bonnet about something compliancy, feel free to reach out and we can vent about it together or share different views if it's something we've got different perspectives on. And if any of these today particularly resonate with you, I'd also be interested to hear that. Or maybe it's just me alone on my own island with some bugbears and some things to celebrate. We'll see. So the first item on my list is related to misogyny in the workplace. And this is also related to, if you recall, for those of you who listened in to Jay Rosen's episode on Great Women in Compliance, the bonus episode on how to network in compliance, we almost had an off-to-the-side conversation because I had suffered a disappointing encounter that I'd shared with Jay, and that came up in his episode, and I was hushing him, saying, shh, I'm going to do a podcast on this, and this day has come. So a little bit more information on this. And just generally, I would like to think that misogyny, not just in the workplace, but generally, is something that we don't have to worry so much about anymore. And every now and again, we have a stark disappointment where we learn that, in fact, it is not completely behind us. It's not a thing of the past. And I think from a world stage point of view, many of you will have seen Yoshiro Mori's comments from the Olympic Committee. He's a Japanese national who made comments about women contributing in meetings. And he inferred that if women are allowed to speak during meetings, it is very difficult to get them to stop. There must be limits on such things. What I found interesting, of course unsurprising, was the general shock at such statements having been made and I think believed by someone. Interestingly, the data behind such things indicates that, in fact, women talking too much during meetings is not the problem. Political scientists find that when groups of 5 make democratic decisions, if only one member is a woman, she speaks 40% less than each of the men. Even if the group has a majority of 3 women, they each speak 36% less than each of the 2 men. And only in groups with 4 women do they each finally take up as much airtime as the one man. So we can see that the balance of power, if you will, needs to be very heavily leaning towards women before they will start taking up a great deal of time during meetings. And I would just like to be clear, I read that last bit from an article written by Adam Grant, that little bit of data there. So in compliance, I'm very grateful that I typically don't come across misogyny in the role. There was a recent example when an individual contacted me and wanted to speak about something substantive in compliance. It was regarding an article that I'd written, and they wanted to learn more about the legislation in a particular jurisdiction. And as I'm sure Lisa can probably relate to, I receive a large number of requests for people to do one-on-one chats, and I try to accommodate those as much as possible, but of course it becomes tough with day job and outside commitments of work, and also just kind of wanting a break sometimes. But I agreed. I thought I could fit it in and wanted to help the person. And when we did get on the phone, he spoke about how great he is and then commenced a sales pitch about his product. He did not refer to the substantive subject matter that was supposedly the purpose of the call. And after a while, as it became more and more clear to me that I was sitting there hearing more of a sales pitch rather than a robust discussion about compliance issues, I interrupted him and said, I had understood that we were here to talk about X. I didn't realize that it was to be a discussion about your product and a sales pitch. So it may not be worthwhile continuing on. It was very nice to meet you, and I wish you a pleasant rest of your day. And at that point, he terminated the call without response, which I thought was a little different and unexpected. And then within 10 to 15 minutes in my LinkedIn inbox came a misogynistic and abusive message. I eventually, of course, blocked this individual, but I remained quite shaken about it. You can probably even hear me breathing harder through the microphone right now. And because it is emotionally uncomfortable, I believe situations of conflict tend to give humans, most of them, not really a feeling of being happy about that happening. And it causes emotions to rise. And I thought very much on this situation, and Jay asked me the question, Mary, do you think if you had just continued on and listened to his sales pitch and sat through it, would you have avoided the conflict? And when I had thought about this myself, I think the answer is very easily yes. Had I sat through it and given up my time and then gushed at the end about how marvelous his product sounded and that I would be happy to speak to my colleagues about getting a demo done, I do not think he would have terminated the call without word and then sent me a verbally abusive message afterwards. However, the other thing that came to mind for me is that if I did do that, is that not simply the corporate equivalent of just lying back and pretending to enjoy it? The fact of the matter is, this individual disrespected my intelligence and my time by misleading me to take a call with him. And to not call out the false pretenses, I think I'm doing a disservice to myself and also disrespecting my own time and my own intelligence to not do so. So we're in a situation where misogyny still exists in the workplace, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is in terms of how to best protect ourselves. I don't believe that a man would have received the same response that I did.